Today we're going to start class just a little differently. I'd like you to take a look at this slide, and I'd like you to look at the words on it. And I want you to pick out 3 words that you think best describe you if you are going to introduce yourself to me at a party for the first time. You only get 3 words. They can be anywhere on the page, doesn't really matter. But pick out the 3 best words that you think describe you, and I'd like you to write those down. So grab a piece of paper and write those down. Why don't you pause the video here for a second while you take a look at that and get those scribbled down, and then you can restart it. Now that you've written down those 3 words, I'm going to put up a second page, and I'd like you to look at the words that you wrote down and look at where they are on the page. And I want you to fix your eyes on that spot. And I'm going to put up a second page that looks very similar to this one, only on the second page there's a different word there. So I'd like you to lock your eyes on one of the words that you picked, and then write down the word that's in the same spot on the second page. So for example, if you picked analytical, up at the top of the second blue column, you will lock your eyes on analytical, and then you will write down the word that appears there. And we'll do that for all 3 of your words, so you don't have to try to figure it out on one swoop. So we'll do it 3 times. So lock your eyes on the first word, and then here is the second page. And write that down next to the word that you had on the first page. Okay, let's go back to the first page again. All right, now find your second word and lock your eyes on that. And here is the second page, and write that corresponding word down. All right, and then let's go back to the first page one more time. There's the first page. Find your third word, and now write down the corresponding word for that one. All right, now I'd like you to look at the colors that were behind those words. And if you had 2 words that were in one of the colors, write that color down. So example, if you had 2 in the yellow, write down yellow. If you had 2 in the blue, write down blue, so on. If you had 1 word in 3 different areas, then I'd like you to pick 1 more word and then write down that color. So pick 1 more word that you think describes you, and then write down that color. And so now each of you should have a color selected that we'll refer to back here in a minute or 2. All right? So you should have your 3 words, some that were very nice and 3 that weren't so nice. And this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about perceptions and the fundamentals of making better connections with people. What we perceive as a benefit, others might perceive as a problem. You think it's you're artistic. People think that you're a nitpicker. Some people think that you're analytical. Others think that you're pessimistic. So the way that we perceive ourselves and the way that others perceive us might be very different than what we're thinking. And so we're going to talk today about how do we make better connections with people, how do we get along better, how do we work better in teams. And so all of those things will kind of be what we're going to try to address today. We're going to start with this quote from former President Richard M. Nixon. "I know you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant." Now, we've all been in situations where we've sat in a lecture, or we've sat at a speaker, we've sat in church, and someone has said something, and then we walk out and we're engaging in conversation with our neighbor, and you say, "Boy, I thought it was interesting that such and such said this," and the neighbor says, "Wait, what? No, he didn't say that, I said this." And so, you both sat in the same room, listened to the same person at the exact same time, yet you came away with different perspectives and different insights as to what was being said. And so today we're going to talk about how that happens, why it happens, and then how we can address it. So we're going to talk today about this thing called the Herman Brain Dominance Methodology. And it was founded by this guy named Ned Herman, who was a brain researcher for General Electric. And he spent his whole career trying to figure out how do our brains work. And the objective that he was trying to solve was how do we make teams work better? And can we understand how people think and process information in order to put them together into teams that are more effective than others? And so he came up with this methodology that he calls the Herman Brain Dominance Methodology. And he basically found that amongst all the people in the world, there are basically 4 fundamental thinking styles. And he color-coded them just to make it easy to understand. And so the yellows are conceptual, the blues are analytical, the greens are practical, and the reds are personal. And so, each of us has a vocabulary within those different thinking styles. So yellows, being conceptual, like to talk about ideas and the why. The blues like to talk about facts and the what. The greens like to talk about actions and the how. And the reds about feelings and the who. So all quadrants are created equal. There's no superior quadrant. We need all of them, and we all have a vocabulary in all 4 of the quadrants, but we use them differently and in different intensities. Where our thinking styles tend to flare is when we feel pressured or under attack. And then our preferred thinking style, the one we tend to lean into, goes into full force, and we try to solve the problem with that thinking style. So, we need the thinking styles to all work together, is what Dr. Herman found, in order to find the best solutions. So I want to go through a little exercise here. So I've put you all into colored corners now. So let's talk to the yellows. So I want to talk to the yellows first. Yellows, I bet we have some people in here that don't like being told what to do. Does that sound familiar? I bet we have some artists and maybe some musicians over here, some people that like to be very creative. I also bet you don't like to, you don't run on schedules, right? You kind of do things when you feel like it, and when you do homework, you do it when the spirit moves you, and that's usually about 15 minutes before it's due. So, that's all part of the yellow thinking style. All right, let's move over to the blues. Blues, hello. I'll bet you like to analyze things. You love to dig into the numbers. You love to have the facts. You don't like ambiguity. You like to be able to come up to a solution, and you love to win. So if someone tells you you're wrong, you will spend hours going out and finding the research so you can come back and throw it in their face and say that you were right. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Let's move over to the red group. In the reds, you like people. You like being around people. You don't like being by yourself. You prefer to be in a crowd. You like for everyone to get along. And you really dislike arguments. And if someone tries to engage in an argument, you will flee rather than fight. Does that sound familiar? You want everybody to get along. You like hanging out with other people. You like solving problems. You like everybody to win in every situation. And now we're going to talk to greens. Greens, I want you to think for a second. You're probably a little annoyed that I waited till you to come to last. And that's part of your thinking style, because you don't like surprises. You like to be organized. You like to have things be on time. You don't like surprises. And so you spend a lot of time. I bet you schedule every time that you're going to do homework, you have it blocked out on your calendar, right? Yeah. So, that's all part of the green dominant thinking style. So, there's common behaviors within each quadrant. For yellows, it's big picture thinking, out of the box, spontaneous creativity, and they love to do strategy. Blues are about accuracy and precision, asking a lot of questions, doing the research, having a logic behind everything, and looking for details. Greens are about tactical, planning, organizing, controlling, having checklists and routines, while reds are about counseling, rescuing, sacrificing, helping and caring for others, and avoiding conflict. So the way that we think, the way that we talk, and the way that we solve problems. Yellows do so by creativity, through innovation, through causing change, through conceptualizing and strategic planning. The blues do so by problem solving, analytics, statistics, financial, math. Greens do so by planning, supervising, administrating, organizing, implementing, controlling. And the reds through expression, interpersonal relationships, empathy, teaching, training, and have a people orientation. Within each of the thinking styles, there are introverts and extroverts, and they have distinctive styles about them. So the introvert yellows tend to be kind of off in their own world. They are very independent and often loners. A graphic designer is kind of a perfect example of that, where they just want to be put in a box, close the door, let me do my work. Extrovert yellows tend to want to just bounce ideas off people. They love engaging with others. They love bouncing ideas and seeing how other people are going to react. For the blues, the introverts tend to be quiet, serious, and focused, whereas the extroverts are often debaters. They love to have fun. They like to joke around, but they are very driven, internally driven. For the greens, it's about controlling, always doing things, often keeping to themselves for the introverts, whereas the extrovert green is very controlled, loves to organize, likes to get people and events all moving forward. And then the introvert reds tend to be expressive in quiet ways through writing, nonverbal communication, whereas extrovert reds tend to be very talkative. They like to bring people together. They like to go to parties. They like to share things. They like to experience other people. So when we're talking to people that share our same thinking style, it's very easy. I'm very yellow. So if I was in a yellow group and a group of people and I just waved my arms in the air and said, you know what I mean? They'd all know what I meant. The rest of you be going, white. But blues and greens get along really well together. Blues, I'll figure it out. Greens, I'll get it done. Yellows and reds get along great because yellows will say, hey, I got an idea. And the reds will say, well, let's talk about it. Wonderful conversation happens. Nothing ever gets done. The blues and the yellows get together well. Yellow, I've got an idea. Blue, I'll figure it out. Greens and reds get together well. Greens, I'll get the people together, or I'll get it organized. Reds, you get the people together. But where we have problems are when we go cross-quadrant, because there's just inherently problems built into both of those. And we're going to talk about those in a second. And that's how I got introduced to this. When I was at Coke, I had a boss that I liked him as a person, but professionally we just were oil and water. We could not get together. And it was getting to the point of being dysfunctional. And I'd walk into his office and he had this chart on the wall where he had all the different things that we had to accomplish. And he had 23 different action items for each one going across the wall. And he'd sit there and write on that wall all day long, and it drove me nuts. My way of getting things done was very different. It was like, okay, folks, this is where we're going. We're going up that hill. Everybody, go. And if somebody fell off into the ditch on the way up, I had no problem with that because, hey, did you find anything useful down there? And, I had no problem with that. I liked the challenge. I liked the discovery. I liked the whoops, wow, didn't think of that. Let's integrate that now. I had no problem with that. And that drove him crazy. So he was driving me crazy with his 23 item PERT charts, and I was driving him crazy through my let's just go get it done, and if something goes off track, we'll fix it. And so they brought in a consultant to sit down with us. And he gave us the Herman brain dominance test. And I'm going to show you now the results of my test. So as you can see, I'm very yellow. I'm also very blue and very red, and I have no green. Well, guess what my boss's dominance was? He was all green. You know, he liked to organize and plan, and you know, that is not my strong suit. So that's why we were driving each other crazy. He had no yellow, I had no green. And the way that our dominant thinking styles were pulling each other apart. So we had to come, once we understood this, now we can come to a resolution. So it was like, aha, okay, now I get it, okay. And he was the same. So we had to come to a resolution that with everything that we were going to accomplish, I would give him a 5-step plan for getting there, and he had to be okay with 5 steps. And after that, we got along well and got everything done. But you know, that's the beauty of the Herman brain dominance, is it can help you make better connections, understand other people better, and then you can move together forward rather than always having this point of tension and conflict. So how do you get your thinking style? Well, it's part nature and part nurture. So nature is about the area that you grew up in. So many of you likely grew up in the southern Idaho, northern Utah region, where there's a dominant religion. And that religion has a very dominant communal kind of aspect to it. And so you grew up with that kind of a perspective. Whereas if you grew up in New York, that would be a very different type of nature that you grew up in. The nurture piece comes basically from your family, from your parents. You know, what did your parents do? You know, so where did I get my creativity? Well, my mom had opened a drapery shop. She loved to do crafts. So, you know, I naturally saw a lot of creativity going on in my youth. You know, if you grew up in a household where your parents were school teachers, then you likely have a lot of red in you. Or, you know, if you grew up in a household that one of your parents was an engineer, you'd likely have a lot of blue. Or if your parents ran a plant, you've got green. So the nature and the nurture are how your thinking styles evolve. And to kind of demonstrate that, let me show you my family's, the rest of my family. So this is my oldest son, Corey, who's a software engineer at Amazon. You know, he shares my yellow, he shares my blue, he shares my red, and thank heaven he has more green than me. Still lacking a little bit on the green, but he has a lot more than I do. This is my youngest son, Tanner. Well, he has my yellow, he has my blue. Wait a minute, where's the red? How did Tanner not get any red? And, you know, he is my son on the green as well. We gave him this test when he was 14, and I saw this coming way before we gave him the test. You know, even as young as 8 or 9 years old, when he'd be playing in junior jazz basketball games. And we'd come home and I'd say, boy, you know, Johnny did a great job today, didn't he? He'd go, who? I'd go, Johnny, you know, the kid that you were like talking to and scored all the points today. He'd go, oh, yeah. And then we'd go to baseball season and Johnny'd be on his team again, and we'd come home and say, boy, Johnny did a great job today, didn't he? He'd go, who? He didn't care. He didn't care about it. You know, all he cared about was himself. Now, this profile actually happens in a lot of great world-class athletes, where, you know, they don't mind. They have kind of the Drago in Rocky mentality. I will crush you. And so, you know, but again, you know, it comes from nature and nurture. But because we caught this at 14, he was able to change a little bit, and I think he has a different profile now if we did, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But here's the rest of my family. So we all share blue. My wife is the only one in the family that's green. We all share red except for Tanner, and we all have some yellow except for my wife. She has no yellow. So why would I marry a green after having all that problems with my green boss? Well, because we counterbalance each other. You know, I come up with the idea, she executes it, and we get along great. We've been married for 25 years. Not once have we had an argument or raised our voice at each other. Not once. Because I understand where her strengths are, she understands where my strengths are, and we don't provoke each other. Just something as simple as, where do you want to go to dinner? I don't ask that question, because if I ask her that question, I'll get a blank stare. But if I say, you know, what do you want to go to Five Guys, or maybe El Toro Viejo, or would you like to go get some Cajun tonight? Then she'll make a decision. But if I just gave her the blank stare, the blank wall, I just get the blank stare. Works out great when you go on vacation. You know, I can say, okay, we're going to go to San Francisco on the second week of July. The Dodgers are in town. We're going to go see a Dodger game over at Giant Stadium. And then I don't do anything except for wait till it's time to get in the car and leave. She plans all the activities. What are we going to do every day? She plans what kind of clothes we're going to need. She packs all the suitcases. And all I literally have to do is pick the suitcases up, go put them in the back of the car, and turn on the car. So, you know, we stay out of each other's lanes, and we understand what each other's strengths are. And so we leverage those strengths together. Now, the question becomes, where do our thinking styles come from? Well, they're formed over time. When you were a child and you had a conflict out on the playground, you'd get it figured out. But as we became about 14, 15 years old, that fluidity started to set up into jello. And by the time you're like 19, 20, it's now cement. And the way that you process information, the way that you see the world, the thinking style that you have chosen as your preferred thinking style will stay with you for the rest of your life. It's not going to change. You know, that's kind of how it's formed. But the blues and the reds, they don't trust each other. The blues will say, oh, look at the data, and they'll say, well, you know, our profitability is down this quarter. We need to lay off some people. And the reds will go, wait, what? But in our mission statement, it says our people are our greatest resource, and you want to lay somebody, who are you going to lay off? Oh, we got to lay off Johnny. You can't lay off Johnny. Johnny's wife's like 6 months pregnant. They need the insurance. And so, you know, there's always this distrust between the blues and the reds, and then between the greens and the yellows, it's just a disconnect because you have a different way of trying to solve problems. And solving problems is the objective here. So the way that we talk is the way that we're perceived. Beware of perceptions, of negative perceptions of other quadrants. Don't think of the yellows as undisciplined dreamers that are scattered and unrealistic. Don't think of blues as unemotional number crunchers. Don't think of greens as picky, unimaginative, grinded out. And don't think of the reds as pushovers, touchy-feely, talk, bleeding hearts. There's a role for each thinking style in this world. The question is, how do we tackle our blind spots? And when we say blind spots, what I mean by that is green is my blind spot because I don't naturally think about the green part. And so as we look at our own personal ways of thinking, we have to understand sometimes we may not be considering things that we need to be considering. So with yellows, a yellow blind spot might be saying, well, why are we doing this? Is it conceptually clear? What does it clarify? If you have a blue blind spot, you know, what are all the facts? Can it be quantified? You know, should we analyze this a little more? Green blind spots, how are we going to do this? What are the details? What's the sequence? How are we going to organize it? Are we going to control? And red blind spots, who's going to do it? Who's the target audience? How is it going to impact people? And then, you know, how are we going to use this experience to relate it to the audience? When we understand ourselves, now we can understand others to make a better connection. So how do we understand others? You know, it's great that I now know my own thinking style, and I'm starting to see how this does fit into my world and how I do react that way. However, how does this help me? Because how do I know what other people's thinking styles are? Well, it's pretty simple, really, if you have your radar up. You know, the job that someone has chosen can lead you to understand their possible thinking style. If someone's in advertising, if someone's in marketing, if someone's a musician, an artist, they're going to be yellow. If you're talking to someone who's an engineer or a mathematician or a science teacher, they're probably going to be blue. If you're talking to someone who is a plant manager operations, who is a wedding planner, they're probably going to be green. If you're talking to someone who is a doctor, a dentist, a nurse, a school teacher, they're probably going to be red as their dominant thinking style. And so, you know, we can take cues off of their major, we can take cues off of their chosen profession, we can take cues off of how they write, and so we'll get to that here in just a second. But as we better connect with people, connect with yellows by giving overviews, using metaphors, keeping it moving, and have fun and not too serious. Blues, you connect better with having brief, clear, and precise messaging, using data and fact-based charts, planning for debate, be accurate and specific. For greens, it's providing opportunity to take notes, unfolding ideas in a step-by-step way, and then being on time and staying on track. And for reds, it's paying attention to nonverbal cues, making eye contact, establishing rapport. So, what's going to trigger people and make them tune out? Well, if you want the yellows to tune out, be too repetitive, be too slowly paced, be overly structured, or drown in detail. If you want the blues to check out, have excessive chatter, inefficient use of time, lack of fact or data, and vague, ambiguous instruction. The greens will check out if you have an absence of a clear agenda, if you run on, if you're too fast-paced, or if you lack closure. And the reds, if you lack interaction, make insensitive comments, have overly direct dialogue, or make critical comments. So what will people appreciate? Yellows will appreciate overviews, freedom to explore, long-term objectives, and minimal detail. Blues will appreciate materials that are to the point, data and fact-based charts, a good debate. Greens will appreciate details, who, what, when, where, how, written schedules, appointments and respecting time and step-by-step explanation. Whereas the reds will like eye contact, informal, comfortable settings, collaboration, and respect for other people's feelings. So, let's read a few emails and let's see if we can figure out the writer's thinking style. Jim, I wanted to remind you of today's action items for tomorrow's meeting. 1, feedback from last week's focus groups. 2, recommended next steps for the priority program. Please forward supporting documents to me by close of business. Thanks, Madeline. What's Madeline's thinking style? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's green, right? She's organizing and making numbers on all the things that she wants. She's organizing her thoughts. So Madeline is likely a green thinker. So, hey Charlie, it's Wolfman. Wow, great kickoff meeting this morning. This is exactly what you were looking for. Sounds like you had a great team. You should think about that team builders weekend thing Sue was talking about. You know, we could use your ideas to tackle Bob's issues with his vendor as well. 3 of us should meet. How does Thursday sound? Oh yeah, let's talk about next year's incentive plans. Call me. Wolfman is likely what? Well, he's very red because he's talking about the team builder weekend thing, but he's also probably got some yellow in him. Anybody that calls himself Wolfman is probably very creative as well. So I would say he's yellow and red. Hello there, Maria. This is Wanley. I wanted to check in with you and make sure that you're okay after this morning's meeting. I really didn't think it was appropriate for your boss to be so critical in front of the whole team. I want you to know that I agree with your approach, and if I can help to convince the boss on this, I'd be happy to work with you. Wanley is flaming red. She's trying to help. She's wanting to eliminate conflict. She wants everybody to get along together. She doesn't like direct, overt language. Suzanne, I got your spreadsheet. I like the way the data correlates to the existing monthly breakdown. Still not sure they're quite ready to move on just yet. Could you find out if finance can supply last year's forecast to match the time periods? Maria is clearly blue, right? She's looking for data, fact-based charts. She wants to analyze things. So here's where this comes in handy. If you understand what somebody's thinking style is, now you can adjust the way that you communicate with them to align with their way of seeing the world. So for example, if I'm doing a consulting project, you know, there's a place that's a scientific manufacturer, make a lot of scientific instruments that I often do a lot of consulting with. And you know, knowing that they're all very, very blue because they're all engineers, I can't walk in and start just throwing ideas up or I'll get shot down, because that's not the way they think. They want data, they want facts, they want analysis. And so even though when they throw a problem out to me, I usually know the answer within a day, it'll take me 2 weeks to gather all the data to support the argument and then go present that to them, because that's the only way I can get them to buy in. And so we have to adjust the way that we communicate with others in order to align with their thinking style. It's not up to them to align for us. We have to change. So we solve problems by walking around the brain. When we interact with others, you know, ask, why is this a problem or an issue? What specifically are the dimensions of the problem? How are we going to take steps both together and independently to address it? And importantly, what's in it for me? How do we come out with a win for everyone? And again, this was a little bit of a wake-up call for me, because I never considered that. You know, is when you get out of business school, you know, they tell you shareholder value, increase shareholder value, that's your job. And, you know, on a lot of my projects, you need collaboration. In almost every job, you need collaboration from other people that don't necessarily report to you. You need their help. And, you know, oftentimes, if they weren't helping on my timeline, I would do their job for them and embarrass them. And I didn't really have a problem with that, because I kept getting rewarded for that. You know, I kept getting raises, I kept getting rewarded. On my personnel reviews, it would say, Schulz gets things done faster than anybody's ever done in this corporation. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. And so, you know, I kept getting rewarded. So I didn't change my behavior. I just, if I had to knock somebody off into the ditch to get it done, I didn't care. But suddenly, you know, at some point you rise up the ranks, and suddenly you'd find yourself in a management position, and you're no longer working with other people, you're killing your own army. And so, you know, this slide, when I went through it with the consultant, was a real slap in the face for me, because I suddenly realized that I had not been operating on that premise. You know, if as long as I won, I didn't care if somebody else lost. And we need to make sure that we don't do that going forward. We want to have everybody come out whole. As we solve problems, ask why. Make sure that everybody's solving the same problem. What are the clear priorities? How are we going to implement an action plan? And then who is going to do what? And how are we going to make sure everybody comes out with a win? So let's walk around the brain for lunch. The yellows, why? It's 12 o'clock, we're hungry. And the blues say, well, let's eat pizza from Mamma Mia's with a thin crust and pepperoni. And the greens pipe in and say, well, how should we get it delivered? At what time? What about drinks and plates and napkins? Drinks and plates and napkins? The yellows would have never thought of drinks and plates and napkins in a million years. The pizza would have shown up, they would have just had the grease on their hands, wiped it on their shirt, and gone on with their day. And then you got the reds, you know, who's going to pay for it? Is everybody going to have enough? But what about John? Johnny doesn't like pizza. You know, we got to make sure that all brain thinking styles are involved with the decision to make sure that we get to the right decision. When we communicate, both written and verbally, this is a really key way of thinking. Now, you've already learned how to write a P&G one-page memo. This is an example of how the P&G one-page memo works. It is designed in a whole brain thinking fashion. Number one, you have one laser keyed focused idea, right? We eliminated the irrelevant. Two, we use crisp, clean statements of key elements only. We don't ramble on and on. Three, we organize it with very precise building blocks and sequences. And four, we make connections as to how it's going to benefit the company. So the P&G one-page memo is a whole brain thinking style document. When we make presentations, we should also think of it in this fashion. How are we going to present our facts? Well, why is this a problem? Why is it important? What specifically are we addressing? And what does the data bear out? How was the research conducted? And again, who can use this and come out with a win? The reason for doing this is just personal. We all want to live a happy, healthy life, right? We don't like conflict. Nobody likes conflict in their life. If you use this as a barometer to help you get along through the rest of your life, you'll find that it will make your life a lot happier and easier. I wish that I had been introduced to this concept much earlier than 39 years old, because it has been part of my DNA now since I was 39, and my life changed dramatically because I learned how to get along better with people. I learned how to read people. I learned how to communicate better with people by understanding how they see the world and then adapting the way that I deal with them. Because at the end of the day, why do I need to change? Because I want to have less conflict in my life. I want to have a happier life. I want to get things done in an easier way with everyone that I work with. What specifically do I want to change? How am I going to go about making that change? And then what's in it for me? What's in it for me to change? And what's in it for me is a happy, healthy life. As we close, let me tell you a story. So I wanted to test this theory. And so one of my marketing teams for the Huntsman Marketing Association, we entered in a national case competition. And I built the team specifically, not with just the smartest people in the room, but by thinking style. I made sure we had 4 people on the team, each representing a different thinking style, and we're very strong in each of those. And we put them out, they got the case, they prepared the case. I told them to think about it as they prepared in a whole brain fashion. And then they went off to Wake Forest University to compete. They competed against Wake Forest, Maryland, Penn, Notre Dame, USC, and BYU. Now, Utah State does not fit in that mix, right? Well, my team walked away with the win. Because when you're presenting things to people, you don't know what, especially when it's a case competition, you don't know what the thinking styles of the judges are. Everybody else came in heavily loaded up on blue. They were throwing out numbers and crunching the data and trying to bludgeon people to death with the facts. Whereas my team came in with a holistic idea of how people are going to come out with a win. Here's the idea, here's the data behind it, here's how we'll execute it, and here's how everybody's going to come out with the win. And they walked away with the victory. This stuff works. And so I'd like to challenge you to see if it'll work for you. You've got access to the PowerPoint on the assignment. Take that first page and print it out, and then go give it to someone that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Could be a spouse, a boyfriend, a boss. Doesn't matter. Just give it to somebody and ask them to do that same little exercise. Have them circle 3 words that they think best describe them, and then look at the colors behind those words. If they have one in each of the 3, one word in 3 different colors, have them pick a 4th. And then start adjusting the way that you interact with them for the next couple of weeks and see if it makes a change. And I guarantee you it will. So, good luck.